So Aquarimax here. Maybe you saw in the thumbnail, maybe you didn't, but my daughter made this of me, which I thought was pretty cool. Complete with our corn snake around my neck and my Aquarimax shirt on, which is awesome. So maybe I should have done, "Hello, Russ of Aquarimax here," something like that. But anyway, I thought that was very cool, so I decided to share it here. And let's see who's in the chat. Did I messed it up. Okay, that's cool. I see Alfiandria is here. How do you say that? I'm not sure. But I am here. Welcome. Frank the Tank, Newt Scamander, and Austin. Oh, hello. I'm going to back up a little bit. I can see just a little bit better. The Awesome Octopus. Greetings. Good to see all of you in the chat. Ashley and the Bug Hub. Sandy Sizemore. Hello. It's just me. Yep, I did start a wee bit early today. I figured I might because I have to end a little early. So. Wow, backyard bugs. You put your gecko in your cricket bin. Ate like 8 of them. Hair Wade, Henry the Stick Bug, Ash M, also known as Truffle Pig. Awesome. So, Alejandria, what is the theme today? Mostly Patreon questions, but I will answer questions from the chat as well, of course. I'm going to let the questions guide the theme. So we're going to start out pulling up the live stream, the Patreon questions for the live stream here. And we'll kind of go in order that we receive them. And of course, I will answer questions from the chat as well, as I said. So Julie from Patreon says, how often do you supplement your isopods? Once per week, every few days? Can you harm them by giving them supplements too often? Kind of depends on how fast you want them to reproduce and so on. I would say I try to give them supplemental food, so in addition to the leaves and wood that's already in there in the substrate. Probably 2 to 3 times a week, sometimes more, sometimes less. I have been known to feed them more than once a day. It depends on the isopod. Some species of isopod, are more voracious. Some setups that I have or enclosures are larger and more heavily populated, so I'll feed those more often. And I would say it's kind of, I let it be guided in part by those factors and what's available too. So, for example, if we get shrimp, which we do on occasion, and there are shrimp exoskeletons to share with the isopods, I will share them with them even if I fed them that day, and that's usually fine. Can you harm them by giving them supplements too often? I would say, in a sense, if you overfeed them, it can be a problem. It's not that they're necessarily going to overeat, but if you put too much food in them for them to eat, you could have issues like mold, which can be harmful, trap baby isopods, in extreme cases cause buildup of carbon dioxide in the enclosures. It decomposes things. Grain mite explosions can happen from too much food, so things like that could be harmful as sort of a consequence of overfeeding supplemental food, if that helps. So Henry the Stick Bug, how hard is it to breed isopods? It does depend on the species, like Frank was saying, and I would say that most species, if you've got the husbandry down and you have males and females together, it's going to be pretty easy. It just happens, you don't need to do a whole lot else. But there are species that are a little trickier than that too. So Ben's bugs, Armadillidium nosotum peach, advice on keeping those. They're actually really hardy species. I really like those. And I would say they're pretty tolerant of a lot of different situations. If you just do the classic isopod setup, they'll do well for you. They tend to breed a little more frequently than Armadillidium vulgare, and they're more tolerant of lower ventilation and more tolerant of a lower gradient, moisture gradient. So yeah, I would say hard to go wrong with those. They're really pretty easy, so they ought to do really well for you. Crystal, hello. And Alejandre, Naguris species red. I'm not familiar with that one. I know Naguris cristatus, and that one's parthenogenic. I don't know about Naguris species red, but 10 is usually enough to get a colony going. You can usually do it with fewer. And Snaeleontologist, I'm pretty certain that the isopods would be interested in the exoskeletons of shrimp, yep. They're interested in snake sheds, other isopod molts, and other molts of various creatures. So yeah, I have no doubt that they would go for that. Coal burrow, I would definitely recommend Porcellonides pruinosus, the powders, for your leopard gecko setup. I've been using that in my leopard gecko bioactive for a long time, and they work well, very well. So to Justin Bozer, thanks for being such a support to all of us with questions. You've helped me get 4 colonies started, and I have a 5th coming next week. Thank you. Well, thank you, Justin, and I really appreciate the support, and I'm glad to help. I love to help. So thank you for the super chat. Most appreciated. And hey, Wally, welcome. See, Wally's in the house now, and I love the rubber ducky shirt here. This is a fun one. This was made by Jabberwork. You can go to eBay, or not eBay, Etsy, and go to Jabberwork, and you can get Isopod shirts like this. So I think, Wally, you have some from Jabberwork, don't you, as well? So, oh, Besser, Justin Besser. Okay, cool, thank you. Appreciate that. And let's see, did I catch up already? That's amazing. How did I do that? What are some beetle recommendations for starters? Well, if you want a beetle that's super easy to keep, super available, I would say do the Morio beetle, Zoophobus morio, the superworm beetle. It's super easy to get a hold of. The only downside really to those is that they, the adults release a repugnatorial fluid that's very stinky if you pick them up. So wear gloves if you're going to pick them up. But if you just want something that's interesting and active and super easy to get, you can get it just about anywhere. That's not a bad one. Some other options for beetle starters: blue death feigning beetles and other related tenebrionid desert beetles, various species and genera there. Eleodes is a great genus, and you can often collect them yourself locally in many parts of the country. I can collect them here, just walk up the few minutes to the hill and I find them there. So it depends on what kind of beetles you want, but those are some great, those are 3 great genera to start with: Zoophobus and Asbolus and Eleodes. There are a lot more too. Oh, okay. So yeah, so Supreme Gecko does have that shirt. Excellent. Ashley N. Oh, good. You got some of the Isopod species Tarragona. Great. Can anything bad come of a ton of paramecium show up in an aquarium? I usually consider that a good thing, except it might mean that there's a little bit, the nutrients might be kind of high in there, but if you have any fish fry, they'll love that. I mean, paramecia are great for a first food for a wide variety of fish fry. So, oh, excellent, Justin. You got, what kind of feeders have you been working with? Oh, thank you, Wally. I appreciate that, putting that link up there. So anybody who wants a shirt like this, go check with Jabberwork there at the link that Wally put up. That's excellent. You're free to put up the links that you want. I trust your discretion, Wally, and that was an excellent idea. So, there we go. Let's look at another Patreon question here. I got a lot of them. Fair bit of them. Ashley N says, what essentials do Armadillidium isopods need in their diet other than protein and calcium? Do they need cellulose, any fats or minerals? Is this different for other species of isopods? And I would say that, great question. I haven't done an in-depth study of the exact nutrient needs of Armadillidium, but I would say that they tend to do much, much better and breed much, much better if they have leaf litter, decomposing leaf litter as a main component of their diet. And that I have read that people have successfully, scientists have successfully maintained isopods for generations, Armadillidium specifically, generations on like one type of leaf and carrots. I think it was alder leaves and carrots, if I'm not wrong, at least in one of the studies that I read. For generations, that's all they got. And that seemed to have all the nutrients they need. Now, I don't know the exact nutrient breakdown for those two items put together, the alder leaves and carrots. But I would say that, yes, they definitely need minerals, and probably the combination of alder leaves and carrots contained some amount of those minerals. It's possible that the proportions of those, just those two foods, were limiting factors. In other words, there may be some nutrients that were in low supply, which kept the population from breeding as fast as it could if they had had a wider variety of foods. And I think that's probably the case in many situations. I think that's part of the reason why a lot of us like to mix the leaf litter and we don't just go with one leaf type. I like to put, half a dozen different types of leaves in the leaf litter that I use. And I do like to add things like calcium and fish food and all these vegetables and everything. I feel like isopods are extremely adaptable to detritivores, and you can probably get isopods to do really well on very limited diets in many cases, but there is something about the leaf litter that seems to make a huge difference in reproduction for most species. There are a lot of species that just won't reproduce very well unless they're getting a lot of the leaf litter. There are some species that'll do just fine on fish food and things like that, but in general, that leaf litter seems to have something, whether it's cellulose and other nutrients, something in the leaf litter seems to be important for that. And I would say different species of isopods do have different proportional needs. Some need more protein. Some of the Porcellio, for example, need more protein than others. So hopefully that helps. It is a great question. And okay, Cole, if given a varied diet, do garters need rodents in their diet? Not necessarily, and there are wild garter species that specialize in specific foods. Garters do not necessarily need rodents. They do tend to do really well with rodents, and a lot of keepers have them exclusively on rodents, essentially. I don't have mine exclusively on rodents, but that is their main diet, and they do really, really well that way. But if you have fish that are thiominase free, for example, or you just do worms and you do some good supplementation with vitamins and minerals, things like that. So those, they seem to do well. I would say a varied diet is probably best if you're not doing rodents, but if you're doing rodents, you can get by on just rodents and they do perfectly well. So I hope that helps. And thank you, Wally. I do have some fun shirts on Teespring if you want to check those out. And I'm just under most of my videos in the Buy Aquarimax merch section, the merch shelf. You can check those out. Okay, so Justin Besser has the mealworms, the superworms, and the dubious. Awesome. So Sandy, the 2 books on Amazon, I don't think they're available in paperback. I keep meaning to get them in paperback, and then I get busy and I don't do it because there's so much going on. But I do need to get them in paperback. I need to get them going. How to prevent mold in a mealworm culture? Snailentologist. I always feel like if a mealworm culture is getting moldy, it's either too moist, or there's not enough ventilation and airflow, or a combination of those factors. So increase the ventilation perhaps if you're not getting enough. Decrease the amount of wet food perhaps, could be another issue. Where I live, it's very, very dry, and it's very uncommon for my mealworms to get a mold issue, but I do have considerable ventilation. There's a lot of ventilation on the enclosure, and that's going to make a difference in general. So have I changed any components of my Isopod substrate mix in the last couple years? Wally, great question. Have I? I have used different types of compost for sure in what I'm doing, and I feel like that's probably the major change. I've experimented with different types of compost and even potting soil sometimes. They all seem to work fine, but yeah, I would probably add a little bit more of the wood pellets, like the soaked oak pellets. And honestly, if I had time and space and oak pellets were a little bit more affordable and available in my area, I would probably make flake soil in large quantities and make that a large component of my substrate, because the flake soil is so good for them. I have made flake soil, but just in small quantities, and I would probably add more of that. And Justin, yes, I add the shed skin to my Isopod colonies, definitely. They do definitely go for that. The awesome octopus. Smooth death feigning beetles, collected some sand from the woods, so it's very rocky. Well, smooth death feigning beetles, I understand, come from sand dune type areas and are specialized to that. So some finer sand might be better for them if you can get it. And Ashley N. So maple leaves. Okay, you get different types of maples, including sycamore. Okay. Well, they seem to be doing well on it, right? And you are supplementing with other things, and I think that partly accounts for it. And Frank the Tank, you know, I've seen some of my dairy cows almost like that, where they have a high dark component in their coloration, where the pieing is the white is reduced, and they look pretty cool. I kind of like those too. Okay, so you feed soft tortilla shells, Supreme Gecko. Really interesting. Okay, I accidentally jumped a lot of chat, and I'm trying to catch up here. Sorry, everybody. Yeah, Justin, the worm sheds and dead insects are great food for them. Honestly, I put if I have a pinky that my snakes don't want to eat, or a fuzzy, I'll put it in my isopod, usually in with the dairy cows, and boom, it's gone in, no, not a very long time at all. I would post that on YouTube, except I don't think people would like that. But just it's impressive, but I don't think they want to see that with a pinky. Bug Realms, welcome. And freeze treating the sand is probably a good idea. Moon over Miami, hello. How, if at all, does microwaving or baking leaves and substrate affect its nutrition for the isopods and other small critters? Good question. I've wondered that myself. I think heating most things will denature certain proteins, including enzymes, in most things, but I don't know that it's demonstrated. I haven't seen any negative effects with the isopods. They still thrive on those leaves. I don't know the scientific scientific explanations for all the processes that are going on when you heat the leaves, but certainly there are going to be some proteins denatured and some, including some enzymes. But it doesn't seem to be a huge deal for whatever reason. Okay, there's another vote from Elaine Smith to get the books printed in paperback. That is helping me. We've got more than, I've had other people have been saying it recently, and the more people say it, the more likely I am to do it. So I do appreciate that feedback. And I'm going to answer VB23's question, do you still do Daphnia? Yes. I have a thriving combo culture of Daphnia and Scuds. I sell them regularly. The colony's been going for years and years, and doing well. So yes, I do. Okay, Luna. Luna, what got you interested in isopods and keeping invertebrates? I think I've been interested in invertebrates forever, as long as I've been ambulatory at least, because I've told people this story before, but maybe not all of you have heard it. But when I was 18 months old, my mom found that I had gone on a walk with my dad and filled my pockets full of live earthworms. So I was interested in invertebrates at least 18 months old, and have been for a long time. So ever since. And I've kept invertebrates of various sorts throughout my life. I was breeding things like Daphnia when I was 13 years old, and keeping, different snails and all kinds of stuff at that age. So I was actually keeping aquatic isopods at around that same age, 13. So I've been into that forever. And I guess in a sense, those isopods got me interested in isopods when I was 13. I was keeping those aquatic isopods. But what got me interested in terrestrial isopods was their use in bioactive vivariums. Right around 2012 or so, I started doing research into that kind of thing. I attended a presentation at a local greenhouse on dart frog enclosures and was fascinated by the idea of isopods and springtails in them. I started reading up on it and how people were keeping them in dart frog enclosures and hermit crab enclosures of all things at the time, and kind of went from there. I contacted a local dart frogger and got my first isopod cultures. So, snaeleontologist, it is not particularly difficult to get permits for Procella laevis or scaber. Speaking of relative difficulty of permits, the process varies widely. you should plan on probably a few months, because it just depends on how busy things are in the the permit world. Sometimes a permit just takes a few days to go through. Other times it takes months, and I have seen both sides of that. Porcellio scaber, I believe you're going to be able to get permits for most states. I have permits for Porcellio scaber for all states except for Hawaii and Florida, and that includes Washington, D.C., which is not a state, but it's in the U.S., and I have a permit to ship there as well. Porcellio laevis, a little trickier. There are a few states where it's not allowed, I believe. I'd have to check my documentation for sure, but I believe Oregon and Louisiana do not permit interstate travel. I do not permit them to be shipped there to their state. Oh, we got another super chat. Hey, Richard, thank you. Sending some love and support. I really appreciate it. Richard, you're awesome. And Richard has been an inspiration to me. His YouTube channel is amazing. If you haven't checked out the Tarantula Collective, even if you don't keep tarantulas, I don't keep tarantulas, still love his website, still love his podcast, The Exotic Pet Collective. So if you haven't, please check it out. And if anybody you already watch Richard, the Tarantula Collective, Exotic Pet Collective, tell us about it in the chat. Love to hear that. Okay, let's see. Oh, so Justin Besser, yeah. Once you have a big enough Porcellio laevis, Porcellionides pruinosus culture, they'll take care of it for you for sure. Yeah, Frank to Tank, I know, they will eat your hand if you give them the chance. Fortunately, it doesn't hurt when they nibble on you. So, the awesome octopus, I capture desert beetles, and I've kept communities of desert beetles from ones that I have caught and ones that I have not caught, and I haven't had any problems. Oh, Wally, that's awesome. First bag of scuds for $4, next for $30. That is crazy. Oh, so are you selling scuds now, Wally? Sean Meister, welcome. So Justin Besser, Daphnia are great food for fish, and they are great food for aquatic amphibians. I would say those are the two main reasons for keeping Daphnia, unless you want to raise Hydra, and you can do that too. But I don't. Hydra are awful pests in aquariums generally, so they're cool, but if you got to keep them out of your aquarium. Anyway, so basically Daphnia make an excellent conditioning food. I use them to condition bettas for breeding and other fish for breeding and stuff. And so they're just cool to have around too. They're just kind of fun, but that's mainly what I use them for, is fish food. And amphibian food is something I've used them for as well. So Sandy, more about the aquatic isopods. Well, I haven't had aquatic isopods for a number of years now, but if I get some more, I'll definitely make a video on them. My isopods, my aquatic isopods that I raised, I think they were Acellus aquaticus, but I could be wrong. I just collected them in an irrigation canal next to my house, like close to my house, not next to, but it was, I just found them when I was setting up an aquarium, and I didn't have anything in the aquarium yet, and so I figured I'd put some in, and they started breeding there. And I was about 13 at the time. Don't eat my microphone, please, buddy. Okay? Okay? You got it? Okay. Thank you. All right. So, let's see. I have kept saltwater isopods of various sorts as well, small ones. And that is just a function of whether you're collecting live things from the ocean and putting them in an aquarium, or you are getting live rock and putting it in an aquarium, you're going to get isopods. It's just an inevitability. And so I kept those when I was keeping marine aquaria, which I did for a while as well. But definitely I'll make a video of that, Sandy, if I start keeping them again. Okay, so Truffle Pig 42 Patreon question says, how have you seen the hobby change in the past 5 years or so? I feel like isopods have a growing appeal, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Okay, well, a couple of things. We've had a huge influx of tropical species, specifically from Southeast Asia, many of them labeled as cubaris, whether they're actually cubaris or not. That seems to be something that's changing in many cases. Many of them are being evaluated and or relabeled, it appears. That's been a big thing. Also, in the past 5 years or so, it's gone largely from a few species that were a hobby species and most of the isopod keeping that was being done was for bioactive vivaria. Now a lot of it is for hobby's sake alone. There's a lot going on for bioactive vivaria, and that's certainly exploded. But I would say that just keeping isopod hobbies for the pure sake of enjoyment has increased a lot. So there you go. Hopefully that answers your question. I think it's a great question. And Ashley Ann asked a question if Cubaris marina breed with Cubaris borneo. I don't actually know that. I think Cubaris, like I was saying before, the genus is kind of a mess in that there are many species in the genus, many species that are identified as Cubaris, and we don't really know if they are, or we're starting to say that they're not. And Cubaris borneo looks like just a big version of Cubaris marina. Since I've never kept either, I haven't attempted to work with them in that way, so I have no idea. But it is a great question. Let's see. Cassie, that is a great question about your black soldier fly larvae to your amphibians. If they're coming out undigested, I would try chopping them up and just see what happens. And if they still come out relatively undigested, at least some of it's probably being digested since they're chopped up. But if you're feeding it to something that's doesn't look, it still looks whole, yeah, that's probably not an excellent thing there. Good observation. Okay, Ashley, you're finalizing your permits. Excellent. That's great. Glad that's working for you. So, awesome octopus. Housing isopods with best beetles. You could probably get away with it. I don't know if you're planning on breeding the best beetles, just keep this in mind. Isopods will attack beetle pupae even if they're healthy in general. I'm not saying that isopods will do that for every species, but Oren McMonagle in his book says that beetle pupae are one of the very few things that isopod will attack when it's completely healthy. So if you're trying to breed the best beetles, I would say avoid it. That is definitely what I would say. So do I think isopods would live in a situation like that? Jay's crazy obsessions. Interesting question. If there's a land section in your aquarium and there's a way for the isopods to easily crawl out of the water, like the driftwood is coming out of the water in large sections, some of the isopods might do better than others. You get something like Atlantosha floridana in there maybe. Some isopods tend to drown themselves pretty well, like Porcellio scaber can do that. They'll often drown themselves, but you could try something like Atlantosha floridana, the Florida Fast. Might be worth a shot. And that will help. Yeah, Ashley, if you already have an existing permit, the process, it does speed it up a little bit. So Wally, you're raising micro and white worms, though. Excellent. So how's Super Ed? He's doing well. I think he's a she, though. So I might have to change it to Super Edwina. Because, with bristlenose plecos, Jay's crazy obsession lives fairly close to me and actually gifted me super red ancestris or bristlenose pleco, and I love that species, and I love the color morph of it. And the males get these very bristly kind of beards or mustaches down the front of their face, and the females get very little bearding going on. And this one has very little bearding, but it's doing well. I've had it for quite a while now. It's doing really well, so I appreciate that again, Jay's crazy obsessions, and Super Ed is doing well. Also staying quite small, which is another indication it is probably a female. They tend to be smaller than the males. Oh, Elaine, I'm so sorry to hear that. That's hard. At least they lived a good life. I'm sure they led a very good life with you, but that is hard, so I'm sorry for your loss. What are you doing? What you doing? What you doing? What you doing? Yeah. He's learning how to say that. At least I hope he is. He says a lot of things. He's not talking a whole lot right now, but So Kaler's Aquatics and Reptiles. You might as well add the name, you know. I was just Aquarimax for a really long time, and I eventually added Aquarimax Pets because I was branching out and not just doing aquatics anymore. And so, yeah, it's a good thing to do. So thank you, Bug Realms, for joining in. Yeah, you love that game, don't you? He loves this. He loves to do this. I'm not sure exactly what it means sometimes, but he gets something out of that. He gets a kick out of doing that. Yeah, you love that, don't you? You're a goofball, but you're awesome. You're an awesome goofball. That's what I have to say to you. Oh, let's see. Where did I put my phone? I want to make sure I got all the Patreon questions. I think I got them all. If there's one in there that I missed, anybody, I'm sorry, but I think I caught all of them. Can be a little tricky without my glasses. I should probably have those with me. We've got a lull in the chat. So I guess you and I can just dance for a second, huh? You want to do it again? Yeah. There you go. Love this guy. He's my buddy. Yep. You are my buddy, aren't you? Nature's alarm clock. Yes. Yep. Ah, yeah, there you go, Crystal. Our names evolve just like we do, don't they? And you're welcome. You're welcome, Justin. Thank you. I appreciate that. Oh, you've got Gold Ornatus? Lamprologus Gold Ornatus? That's awesome, Wally. Sorry you didn't get any multis. Are you in the market for multis? Because I have a pretty robust population now, and maybe you and I could talk. What do you think? But the Lamprologus Gold Ornatus, that is awesome. So Ashley Ann, excellent question about diurnal isopods. I love zebras for that. They are great. They're probably the best armadillidium for activity during the day. There's some others that are good too, but I would say Porcellonides pruinosus, any color or mixture of colors as far as that goes, is great for diurnalness, and they can be some of the least light-sensitive isopods out there. Dairy cows, of course, are really good. Milkbacks, so Porcellio laevis, but specifically those two morphs are better. Orange does not seem to be nearly as orange does not seem to be nearly as diurnal or as bold. California mix does not seem to be quite as bold or diurnal either. So those are my votes right there. Okay, I got one more I got to add. Porcellio ornatus yellow dot. I think some of the other morphs are similar that way too, but none of my colonies of the others are big enough yet to really tell, but Porcellio ornatus yellow dot is extremely day active. They're awesome. So, and Snaeleontologist, can way too many springtails stress out isopods? I don't think so. I believe Oren McMonagle mentioned that they don't tend to stress out isopods, and I don't think they do, personally. I think it's hard to have too many springtails also. I generally try to, I feel like if springtails are thriving in my isopod cultures, it's in a good place. I feel like if I ever get to the point where the isopods are out-competing the springtails, I'm probably running too low on food and the substrate's getting kind of exhausted, and I need to make a change in there. So honestly, I don't think they can. Well, that is a good question, Sandy. Why isopods, we have to remove the isopod food from the isopod poo from the enclosures, but some people add worm castings. Well, I think it's partly that isopods and worms probably are processing nutrients differently, so there are going to be different compositions of the worm castings and isopod frass. But I also think, well, it's true that isopods will actually eat their own frass to get certain nutrients from it. So, and you know, eventually they're not going to get a whole lot out of it if they keep doing that over and over again with the same frass. It's going to lose some of those nutrients, but to a certain extent they do that. And it is arguable whether we need to change and remove isopod poo from the enclosures at all until it's just too deep. I think Oren McMonagle has talked about leaving the isopod frass in there for years and years and years and just topping it off, adding things to it. I feel like though you can do that and it's not necessarily bad, you're going to get lower reproduction, and I've noticed a much better, more consistent reproduction of the isopods when I do periodically replace a portion of the substrate. Never all at once if avoidable, but if I replace 1/3 to 1/2 of the substrate at a time, or even 2/3 of the substrate at a time, that old substrate is going to lend some consistency in the microbiological diversity that you want in there, and keep the isopod culture kind of cycled, to use the word from Aquaria, kind of keep that cycled. It's good to have that in there, but putting that new stuff in there is going to add a lot more nutrients, and it tends to give kind of a boom to the population. Isopods seem to be doing well. So Trini, I would say rubber duckies. In my experience, fish food is their favorite. And other fish-based food. Like you get the dried minnows, the iso meal, no, is that what it's, no, iso grub. The dried minnows, they like that kind of stuff, and they like fish food. That seems to be the key. So Supreme Gecko. Well, let's talk Wally if you want to. No pressure, but if you want to make something happen, we could. So Mark C. Lehman, any thought about ants and isopod interactions? Well, there are some species of isopod that are adapted very thoroughly to living in isopod colonies. I haven't worked with any of them myself, but I think it's fascinating that these isopods are specialized for living in ant colonies. So there are definitely some interesting interactions that go on there. Huh, that is interesting, Wally. The 10 minutes flicking springtails off with its antennae. Interesting. So maybe there are cases where it could be an issue. I don't know. Oh, like spike. Excellent idea. I appreciate it. Do love the like spikes. It really helps get things going. Super cool. We got 21 people in the house and 22 likes, so not bad. I'll take it. Oh. So Tanner. Oh, well, thank you, Tanner. I appreciate that. That's great to hear. I always appreciate some support like that. So Snaeleontologist, what's the least number of individuals needed to start an isopod colony? Well, I've heard it be done with as few as one. Ryan Orr, who founded the original Orange Dalmatians, some of the Orange Dalmatians in the hobby are descended from, most of them are descended from his. I also produced Orange Dalmatians separately from Ryan Orr and got those out in the hobby as well, so there are those there too. And the ones that I sell currently are descended from both lines, but I'm trying to remember, but what I believe is that his line was descended in part from orange isopods that he isolated himself. So they were not part of the Spanish line that Oren McMonagle brought into the hobby, but they were descended from an individual he found himself on his own property, a female, who happened to be gravid, and she released some young, and he founded an orange colony on that, and then later he used that to found Orange Dalmatians. So as few as one. And that's also true, of course, for things like Nagurus cristatus, the parthenogenic dwarf striped isopod, or the Trichorhina tomentosa, the dwarf white. They're also, very foundable with just one. There are some others that may be parthenogenic, such as Isopod species Tarragona, and any gravid isopod, in theory, could found a colony. Now, you don't want to necessarily start it with such a small number because you could suffer from inbreeding depression, except in the case of parthenogenic isopods, where inbreeding is not a thing because of how parthenogenesis works. At least, yeah, parthenogenesis and isopods, there are different forms of parthenogenesis, but anyway, as far as we know, the isopod parthenogenesis is all cloning. And so you're not passing on deleterious recessive genes because you're just passing on a copy of what the mother had, and presumably anything that's healthy enough to keep reproducing is probably not have any genes that are too deleterious. So, Wally, how are your morning geckos doing? Quite well. I've got 3 babies, and I actually, they're not babies, they're not hatchlings. 3 juveniles that I need to send off to new homes, and I've got my colony adults is doing well, producing eggs. I've had my morning gecko colony now for about 8 years, and they're doing well. We need a love button for a podcast like this. I love it, Elaine. Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah, morning geckos are great. New localities. I'd be interested in doing some of the other localities too. I think the yellow-bellied ones are interesting. Magic potions, Trini. Good. Thank you for mentioning that. Heather was mentioning that to me, that the magic potions seem to be more diurnal than some of the other armadillidiums. So that's a good option too. And snaily intelligist, I think inbreeding can be a danger for them. It's probably not as bad as it is for some other species. It doesn't appear to be for parthenogenic isopods, but for others, if you start with a very small founding population, it potentially could be. And Ashley said, okay, Ashley N. Her gestroy produced off of 1 gravid female. Yeah, there you go. Got a colony working. Oh, Jay's crazy obsession. I actually didn't go to the local expo because I was herping that weekend in St. George. My son goes to university down there, and so it was a very short herping trip, but since he is about, half an hour or so from the Mojave Desert, we drove down from his school after we picked him up and took him and his girlfriend herping several different locations down there in the Mojave Desert, and it was pretty cool. It wasn't the most fruitful trip, but we did see some cool lizards, found some centipedes. It was a fun trip. It just wasn't quite as fruitful, like no desert tortoises this time or anything like that. We found some tadpoles, things like that. I actually released a video about it recently, so yeah, it was pretty cool. Okay, I see what's going on, Ashley. The male died, and they came with 5 females, and 1 was gravid. And possibly those other females could have been fertilized, since isopods can store sperm for multiple broods, so I guess that's possible too. Okay, well, this is interesting. I think it would be interesting to find out why magic potions are more day active than a lot of other morphs of the same species. And are these American line magic potions or Japanese line magic potions? Curious about that too. And Drip Blood, hello. Uh-oh, are we getting close to the time? We are getting close. I've got about 4 minutes because I have to end early today because my daughter has a concert. Can't miss the concert, so got to make sure. It is indeed a ducky shirt. And there's a link near the beginning of the live chat that Wally was kind enough to put in there if you want to get a link to how to get these on Etsy. So, Bree Schultz, are there any good locations in or near Salt Lake County for herping? Yes. Actually, any of the canyons near Salt Lake, there's some decent herping up there. We've got a lot of species actually just in the canyons. There are whiptails. There are things like side blotch lizards and Chaloparus lizards. There are, we've got western yellow-bellied racers. We've got the Great Basin gopher snakes, Great Basin rattlesnakes, wandering garter snakes, rubber boas. If you go up to the right, whoa, that was loud, buddy. If you go to the right places at the right seasons. Diamond Fork Canyon's a good one. I've been up there. It's a good place. So basically any of the canyons are good around there. So I hope that helps, Bree. Those are some of the species you can hope to see if you go up into the canyons here. And let me know if you have other follow-up questions about that. I like Neff's Canyon personally. It's a good one near Salt Lake. It's in Salt Lake County. That's a good one to find some of those things. I've seen a lot of rattlesnakes up there, specifically the Great Basin rattlesnakes. Exotero-lined frogs and co. I don't think I have. What are some good online vendors, honey bee sting, to buy invertebrates from? Well, bugs in cyberspace is one of my absolute go-tos to buy invertebrates from. He has a wide variety of invertebrates. Great place to go. If you're looking for invertebrates just all over the spectrum, can't go wrong with bugs in cyberspace. I would say that's my first one that I would recommend for sure. Okay, so Ashley, and you're saying they're out during the day but not so active. Got it. That does make sense, I think. It's easy to see them, but they're not going to be running around like dairy cows or zebras as much. Okay, Newt Scamander, I like your line of thought with magnolia leaves here. I think magnolia leaves are a great option, but I wouldn't feed them exclusively. They do take longer to break down, and they probably have a little bit more to them. But I would say that I prefer to include magnolia leaves with other leaves and just do a mix of leaves that break down more quickly and more slowly. Do some oak, do some magnolia, do some maple, do some, different types, cottonwood and different types like that. And that's great. So this is a great question, Newt. You want as much of a mix as possible. You're going to get different nutrients and you're going to get different decomposition speeds. So kind of like the more things you put in your salad, basically. And yes, that is a good point, Jay. You need to make sure you pack out what you carry in. I love the rubber boas, Sean. Yes, they are so cool. I actually rescued one a number of years ago. I was up in a canyon, actually not too far from here, and some kids were surrounding something, so I was curious about what was going on. I went close, and there was a snake, and they were debating what to do with it, and they were kind of poking at it. So I picked up the snake and carried it off and released it in a place where those kids weren't going to get to it. So that was, I haven't seen a rubber boa since, actually, so I hope to see some more. How do you find Isopod importing permit? If you have a video about it, which one? The guy with the animal. So Isopod importing from other countries? That I haven't done yet, and it's difficult to do unless it's an Isopod that's established in the US, because I have asked. But not to say it's impossible, but it's a lot more difficult. Oh, Jeff is in the house. That's true too, Sandy. The magnolia leaves. I actually put some magnolia leaves in the enclosures that I have prepared for my baby garter snakes. I'm really excited about the baby garters. My female Ruby, my female garter snake, it looks like she is about to pop, and it could be any day now. It's been about, let's see, 2.5 months since she awakened from brumation, and so it could be any time. And the last time I saw her mate was around the 15th of March. So, anytime. And I use magnolia leaves in there. It's all ready. I've got 2 enclosures ready for babies, 2 bins with gaskets that are drilled for ventilation. I've got magnolia leaves and pieces of wood and little hides. And I've had them on, a heat pad is under a corner of each enclosure with a thermostat. So everything's all ready to go. They've got a little humid hide in there. Very excited. Hey, Space Kraken X, hello. Oh, yep, I gotta be mindful of that concert. It starts at 6:30, so I got a little time, but I'm gonna have to wrap up here. Yeah, Ashley, that's a good point. I give mine pear and plum leaves, for sure, and probably a couple more. And so Ruby, yes, the offspring, I have a pretty long waiting list for the offspring, actually, so if I have somewhere between, up to 10 or 15, somewhere in there, offspring, they're all going to be spoken for. But if I have more, then there's still openings on that list. So if anybody wants to be on the list, let me know. Okay, so that guy with the animals, okay, from state to state. To receive them is actually a lot easier than to ship them out as far as permits go. And if you have a permit for species that are established in the United States, to receive them, you can get a permit, kind of a blanket one, to receive from other US states within the continental US have shipped to your house, it's a lot easier. So hopefully that helps. Oh, Jeff, that's awesome with your dart frog vivarium. I would suggest Leucomelis over Auratus just because Leucomelis is more old. So Space Kraken X, you want me to say Engineer Gaming? Mr. and Mrs. Morelia, excellent to see you here. Thank you for joining in. Oh, you got some zebra pill bugs for the Mister from our last reptile show. That's awesome. Enjoy those zebras, and thank you for showing up. Ah yes, Twilly is definitely putting on a little concert and grooming my beard at the same time. And Jeff, I do hope you're able to get some garters at some point. Maybe your mother will relent. I hope so. I better head out because I don't want to miss the concert. But it's been great. Thanks for joining in, and got some more videos coming out soon. On Friday I'll have a video for you, so I'll see you next time. Everybody stay healthy, stay safe, and enjoy your critters.